Non, ça, c'est à moi. Je vais à côté. Excuse-moi. Bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's a short series of meetings tonight. First of all, for those in the room who need interpretation devices, there are some on the table.
Donc, ce soir, nous avons, comme je dis, une série de 3 réunions.
Tonight, we have a series of 3 meetings. First of all, it's a public hearing at the request, a rezoning request, actually. And then there'll be a special meeting to cover a few points, in particular the rezoning request or application, and that also for downtown center budget, the business improvement levy. And then we'll have a closed-door session for other concerns. So to open the public hearing, I need a motion to open, moved by Councillor Jean-Claude Bertin, seconded by Councillor Janice Cormier. Ah, you see? Haha. All those in favor shall say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried, and thank you. As I was saying, I was referring to it's due to an application, the Nomi and Ruth Women's Wellness Center, right now on Calder Street in Shediac. They want to rezone the Webster House to move the center to that location. As part of our discussions, as always, we'd ask the people be respectful. Our planning service, Plan 360, will summarize the application. We will share the process to date, and the applicant will have a chance to make a presentation, explain their project, what they're looking for, and after we received many comments from the public, and the clerk will summarize essentially the items raised as part of that correspondence. And after, we'll invite people here in the room. Well, we did not receive any requests to address the hearing. If there are things you want to add in addition to what was raised in writing, if you have any new information, for example, you would have an opportunity to do that. The council members will also have the opportunity to ask questions that we can ask them of Plan 360 and of the applicant. If there's some ideas that come to mind or some info they're looking for, and then that will be the end of the public hearing portion. So first of all, a presentation by Plan 360. We have our city planner, Phil Robichaud. Good evening, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, and members of the council and members of the public. So tonight, it's we're presenting a rezoning request for the integrated development zone for Webster House. The applicant is Naomi Ruth. As the mayor said, we'll go through some details of the project. And I will close with a recommendation. So this is the public hearing. It's the opportunity for the public to offer their comments. Notice was published on the municipal website and also sent to those within a radius of 100 meters. So let's locate ourselves. It was on Riverside Drive. You see the property in green here and red here. If you go a little bit closer, it includes 5 properties, 114 Riverside Drive. It's a rather wide property, much wider than what you normally see in the town of Shediac for a residential property. 8 acres, and you see that it's wooded with mature trees. It offers a good buffer and some privacy from neighbors. And around there, it's mostly single-family dwellings to the east, south, and west. And in the north, there's a multi-family dwelling, about 50 units next to Skuduk, or next to the Skuduk River. There's general commercial, and then there's the R1 low density residential. To the west, you see R3. That's high density residential for the town of Shediac. Now, the reason that it's zoned general commercial is that in 2023 the council adopted rezoning. We had a request to apply an event space, so that we rezoned to allow that. It would include it was to include a restaurant, a bed and breakfast, and an event space. So the application by Noma and Ruth, they were already operating on Calder Street. They've been working out of there for 2 years. They're seeking for 12 years rather. They're seeking to expand their operation. They offer services to women suffering from addictions. People can stay there for about a year, and there's also staff on site. It's a 1-to-4 ratio, and there's medical treatment by doctors, and also some professional advice in terms of how to reintegrate into the community. So the challenge is that what the applicants want to do is add something to the zoning descriptions something called a group home. It's not allowed anywhere in our bylaws as it stands. There's no specific zone that we can rezone that property to as it stands. That's why the request is to do integrated development. It's a special tool in the city planning law. This is used to cover situations that are not covered in the bylaws. So this is something that we do on a case-by-case basis to frame specific projects. And for those zones, you need to identify all of the allowed uses and the conditions. What is proposed is to take everything that was allowed in 2023 and add group home. So again, not much will be changing for the properties zoning. We will only be adding group home essentially to its conditions. So the divide is divided into different boroughs. That's the vision of the town. Now this is the Shediac Scoudouc River borough. That zone is characterized by single-family dwellings, yes, but it does recognize that we're close to downtown. It does mention that it can allows for a bit more residential density, but it also talks about maintaining the integrity of existing neighborhoods and having traditional zones where we are seeking to get a bit more density. I put some photos here of the site. I took some pictures, and the intention here is as I said, it's a much larger property, 8 acres, lots of mature trees on this property. It's a really natural setting. The only visible home, the Webster House, it's the one you see right there. It was part of the Webster Manor, but it was sold separately. And afterwards, there was a house built lately, actually. Now, this is from Riverside Drive. See the Webster House a bit further from the street. There's a row of trees along Riverside Drive. Offers some privacy and a sense of intimacy to the property. Here is the Webster House. And from Webster Street, now we're facing 2 streets here, and I just want to show you that to the right, it's Leblanc Street, and there's a rather dense series of trees separating Leblanc Street from this property. And on Webster Street, there are streets between that, which essentially, hides the view of the home. So to conclude, there's no zones that would allow the project. So this is a good use of the integrated development zone. It offers precious services to citizens, valuable services to citizens, and this allows us for the provision of care to a larger population. As I recall, there are 23 people on Calder. They they can accommodate about 23 people right now on Calder Street. They want to have more space to offer services to up to 40 people on that property. It's a pretty unique property. It's quite large, much larger than what you typically see in a municipality. Large, densely wooded property, offers privacy to the owners and the neighboring properties as well. There are no concerns about traffic or noise. It's not a usage that produces a lot of traffic or noise, and there's no building expansion planned. So the Webster House is a heritage home. They don't expect to be making major changes to the home. They'll be using the existing structure as it is. So uses will be, well, this is to refer to the zoning bylaw to make sure that the propositions are respected and to list permitted uses. They want to basically take the rezoning of 2023 from 2023 and add a group home to the permitted uses. That would be the only thing changing with this application. So this all started on August 19th. They asked Plan 360 to start the administrative and legal processes, and on September 25th, we presented this to the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. It's not a that was not a public hearing. This is to present a recommendation to Council. Tonight is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for the public to give their comments, and once it's done, the Council will have respected their obligations under the Planning Act, and they can make some decisions based. They can either decide to accept or refuse the application. They have to do it in two separate meetings. No final decision will be made at tonight's meeting. The recommendation of the committee is to accept rezoning, and the rezoning allows the applicant to expand their services on addiction services to a larger property what offers privacy with minimal impact on neighbors and no impact on traffic or noise. And thus concludes my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Robichaud. Are there any questions from council members for Mr. Robichaud? Councillor Peter Bro, question in terms of the readings. You mentioned that the readings have to be done over the course of 2 meetings. Is it for a reason why we have to do the first and second reading during the same meeting? Not so we do all 3 during the same meeting. So the standard practice is to do 1 or 2 meetings, to do 1 or 2 during the first meeting and the others after. But it doesn't really matter how you divide them. Councillor Bro, normally what we do, we try to do either 1 or 2 readings the first meeting, and then the third reading for the following meeting. We can do 1, and we can also do 2 and 3 on the next meeting. It's up to the council to see what they want to do, and then there's no decision made until there is third reading. Great. Councillor so the PRAC committee, when did they meet to recommend going forward with this? September 25th. Are they aware of the people's objections? How does it work? We have a public hearing, but does the PRAC have the same process? That's a good question. PRAC is detached, actually, from public hearings. It is there to offer a technical reservation in terms of city planning and the principles of city planning. It's actually on purpose that is detached from the public hearing. So it's up to the council to get public comments right during a rezoning. So around the PRAC, no, they don't see the objections. No. Is that a good thing? We have them and they don't have it? It seems strange to me as concepts go. They have to make recommendations based on the principles in your municipal plan. So it's really focused on your plan's vision. It's a technical recommendation. It's standard operating practice to work that way. Okay. Well, it's not okay, but inaudible.
Le PRAC donne une
PRAC,
évaluation technique.
does a technical assessment on the part, and there are citizens that will participate on that. At the municipal council, here's where we hear the public's opinions and take that into consideration. Councillor Joël Després, and then Councillor Ronald Cormier, remote. Thank you for your presentation. So on Calder right now, the site on Calder, it's zone 3, R3, and so the reason why it's not classified as group home is because it's smaller? No, it's been operating longer than the plan, so it's grandfathered in. Thank you. It's a non-conforming, it's a grandfathered situation. Councillor Laurent Cormier. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Phil, for your presentation. On that presentation, you say that on Calder right now, there are 23 residents potentially who are there at the same time. We're still seeking to expand that to 40. If the council should say yes to this application, is 40 maximum? A maximum number? When we say, when saying yes, could the 40 become 80? Because, as you mentioned, we have that's 8 acres. You could build more buildings on 8 acres. That's a good question. It becomes a bit difficult to manage all this. Usually, you manage the scope of this with the size of the building, so they can have up to 40 people there. But really limiting number of people in a building, it's difficult. So in the planning regs, if the council will decide, we'll decide, but would perhaps an option be to put in the rezoning, legally speaking, maximum 40s, for example, would that be legal as to impose that condition? I don't think so, but as I mentioned, in terms of the scope and density of the building, it's in line with the size and the most typically number of units. It's one shared unit here. So limiting the number of people there would be possible with a condition. But if the lot is not does not used as part of the rezoning, because it's not automatic if you decide to build another building within those 8 acres, would that be automatic, or am I misunderstanding? There could be several residential buildings on the same lot. You couldn't do that, actually, and Webster House is a heritage home, and that means that you can't expand the building without the approval of the municipal council. So in terms of the size of the building is already set and under already existing conditions. But a few months ago, the owner, the current owner, had come to us for additional constructions, not related to the building, but other buildings within those 8 acres. We had granted the approval. Would one have something to do with the other, would you say? Well, if it's the bylaw that was there before, because it was commercial, he could have made more buildings, but the key word is commercial. A group home, it's a residential use. It's in a building that can't be expanded owing to its heritage status. Thank you. And if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, the only zoning that allows more residential units on a lot is R3. No other ones allow it. Yes, that's as I recall as well. Councillor Miller Bryan, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Phil, for your presentation. One question. This has been zoned general commercial. When we change to ID, Is it all 5 or just it's all together? It's one lot. It's all operating as one lot. So it's a different PID. All 5 PIDs will be rezoned. And what's the reasoning for that? That's what the property is for Webster House. It's those 5 PIDs. That's the request of the applicant as well to rezone all 5. It's the same. Is it the same person who owns all 5 lots? Oh, I understand.
Conseil Paul Boudreau.
Councillor Paul Boudreau. Phil, you referred to Webster House as a heritage home. Is it recognized by the province or federally? Is there a specific mandate for that building? In other words, can they do what they want to do in a heritage home? That is controlled by your own bylaws, your zoning bylaw. You have some measures whereby heritage homes can't have structural modifications without your approval. It's in your own bylaws for zoning that it's shared heritage. It's not provincial or federal. They cannot make structural modifications to the building. They can't expand or change the structure, the character of the building, without going through a rezoning process, essentially. That's how the bylaw is written.
If you're going to modify the structure, you have to go through a rezoning process. So can have to accommodate 43 or 40 people. It is a building which is already big enough. It has a certain number of bedrooms, and so the structure is basically what changes. And so that would be non-structural, though. So yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And you said one building per lot. That's right. There are 5. In other words, they couldn't build anything else. Not another residential building. That is correct. Without the approval of the council. That is correct. You have to rezone it to the same zone, but with modifying the conditions. We could apply conditions. Yes, you could apply conditions to it. You are entitled to add additional conditions. But the way it's written, it's not necessary. Thank you.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur Robichaud.
Thank you, Mr. Robichaud.
Excuse. Donc,
now,
au prochain. Donc, nous avons le requérant de Naomi and Ruth Women's Wellness Center.
We have the applicant, Naomi and Ruth Women's Wellness Center.
Welcome. Bienvenue.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council and guests that are here. I count it a privilege to address you today. Before I get into my presentation, I might just clear up a few things that have come up as you've diligently discussed things with Phil Robichaud. First of all, we've made an offer to purchase about 4 acres, so it's one of the PIDs. And I heard something that would the same group home designation be applied to all PIDs. And as far as we're concerned, all we're concerned about is that PID, that 4 acres approximately, that houses Naomi and Ruth. Or sorry, houses 114 Shediac, the actual building.
The building that's on it, yeah.
Historic site itself is all that, that's what brings us here today. So if it makes council feel better, there's probably a way to designate that zoning only for that piece of the property. Secondly, we have no plans to build. And thirdly, When we looked at the place, we said, well, what could this house if we filled it the way that we're filling the current property? Well, maybe we could fill 40. Maybe we could fit 40 in there. And that's where the 40 came up. I'm going to leave that because I'll address it in my presentation. I don't want to take any more time because I have a limited amount. And I want to be respectful of your time and the residents that are here and took their time to come out today. So our story starts generations ago when there was a young woman that was destitute whose name was Ruth. It's a true story. She had hit what we would call today in the world of addiction, she had hit bottom. And she also had a responsibility to care for her late husband. Her husband had died. Her late husband's mother, Naomi, she took on that responsibility and decided she would care for her mother-in-law. She said to her mother-in-law, wherever you go, I'll go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And from that moment on, her mother-in-law had her back. That's who we are as Naomi and Ruth. We have the back of women in our society that are culturally displaced, with all respect to everybody that's here. We are all one decision away from the kind of lives that these ladies have lived. Some of them are in a very high risk and vulnerable position. So we come centuries later to our present day, and our beloved Canada has a significant shortage of beds to help women with addiction problems. Naomi and Ruth was incorporated as a CRA charity in 2012 to help women with addiction problems. We've been operating at 75 Calder Road in Shediac since 2015. And currently, we have 17 in our program. I don't know where the number 23 came up. I think a couple of years ago, they had maxed out at that. It was just too much for the property. And we feel comfortable at around 15, and that's what we're currently housing. It's still crowded. We have very stringent operational guidelines. For every female applicant, there is a suitability assessment that they have to pass. And the program is laid out in detail. They come into a 30-day trial period. Like you, I've driven by places like we see in Moncton. I've driven by tent cities in our major centers in our Canada. And I've kind of said, what has my Canada come? And one day I personally felt okay. I personally can curse the darkness, or I can light a candle and do something. And that's why my wife and I moved here to Shediac, so we could help in any way we can. The subculture of drug addiction is a life of ease. You get up when you want, you do what you want, you live how you want. That is not Naomi and Ruth. And that's where the whole terminology of group home disturbs me a little bit. When I talked with Phil, my understanding was that we needed to find something that was a terminology in the existing bylaws that define what we're doing. But I have, in my past life, had my business next to a group home. There were teenagers. There were young people that were kind of gone from group home to group home, or from foster care to foster care, and got old enough that nobody wanted to look after them anymore, and the city had to put them somewhere. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but that's not what we do. We have mature women that have decided that they want to give a year of their life to straightening out and have a new start like Ruth of old. That's the kind of person that we look after. There's drug screening on their arrival. There's a random drug test throughout 12-month intensive training program. And we have a very strict no outside visitors policy. We do not have the police come because of disturbances. There's many learned skills in the year that these women give of themselves, all with a faith-based spiritual component, as you might have guessed when I alluded to a story from the Old Testament in the scriptures. There's many hours of one-on-one support for each resident. They're taught personal finance and budgeting, and they are trained to be employment ready when they leave. You have been served by some graduates of our program in this town. It's not fair to them for me to tell you where you were served by them, but they're well adjusted, they're in our community, and they're a credit to society. When someone has hit rock bottom and they start to deal with their issues, they are reaching deep into their soul. When they graduate from our program, they are changed. So we feel that 114 Riverside is better equipped to service our current residents and staff. There's 2 on-site apartments, which allows in-house staff to be present. Right now, our in-house staff are kind of living totally integrated. Our teaching room is the living room of our director of care. And it's just not ideal. Whereas this home, there's a side porch here that you can see right on the right. It's a beautiful glassed-in porch, so well looked after. It'd be a great teaching area. It's a classy place where someone can heal and grow into their new life, like Ruth of old. Any future growth, we are adamant about this, will be subject to healthy resident-staff ratios and slowly phased in over 3 to 5 years. Listen, I was a businessman. I wanted to see growth in my company. We are not here as some corporate business that's looking for money from shareholders, and we have to grow to impress anybody. We want a place of comfort to our residents because they can heal in that environment. This is a beautiful property. We're connected with doctors and community professionals. We have first aid trained staff. The file is kept with details on each residence. Logbook records day's events. We have high standards of governance, policies, and procedures. We have been operating as good neighbors, maintaining the high quality standards that has made us successful. We have respect for the historical significance of the John Webster House. We're here to serve the community, not to take from the community. We maintain a local board of directors. I'm going to ask Dr. Stephen Hart to just address you for a minute. Medical doctor, he's the chairman of our board. We're serious about helping people. But before I ask him to say a few words, I want to ask you something. Before tonight, did you know about Naomi and Ruth? You may have. Hopefully, it was a good impression, but you may not have. If you've never heard of us, then I want to tell you something. That tells you we're doing our job. That tells you the police aren't there every other night. That tells you we are not creating disturbances. That tells you that for every resident, there's not some hungry for a woman guy lurking around, because that just doesn't happen. Dr. Hart, would you just come and address our worship, the mayor and the council? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Your worship, council. I'm Stephen Hart. I'm from Fredericton. I first visited Naomi and Ruth about 12 years ago when they're in Plaster Rock. We have a group that visits homes of this type around the province. at present visit 8 homes across the province every month. So every month for 12 years, that's a fair amount of driving. We go winter and summer. We don't go through snowstorms. I was a family physician in Fredericton for 35 years and got 2 young doctors to take over my practice, and then I retired to look after patients in the hospital for another 5 years. But then I had a lot of time on my hand, and I was looking for meaningful things to do. And I hooked up with this organization, that Prison Ministries, that visits these homes. And it is honestly, for me, I keep telling them, I don't go there for you guys. I go there for me, because I see firsthand young men and women. There's a lot of men centers too, but young men and women who come in there who are caught in the terrible problem of addiction in our society. And we all know and see how bad that is. And this is a program that works. It works because it's been set up in a way that cares for people, but it's also very strict with them. And they begin to realize how valuable it is to them. So it really I do it because it's so good to my heart, and I'll continue to do it until I can't do it any longer. But I was down to Naomi and Ruth this morning. We met in the living room. Room was full. There was 12 ladies there and 6 visitors. We had a wonderful time there, and I've known these women over a long period of time. I see the change that happens, and it's something that our society should know more about. But we're not going to brag about it. We're just doing it because it's what we feel we need to do. And we do need the support of communities to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Question de la part des membres du conseil. Any questions?
Questions from the council?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I live on Hamilton Street, right in back of not quite in back of the home. I never hear them. I rarely see them. They walk the street Calder, but I never hear any complaints. I never hear anything. No noise, no rackets, like a few houses on that street. Or on mine. I'd rather switch houses, keep them, and give others to.
Okay.
Like, can't do that.
I've been a property owner all my life. And I can understand concerns that people would have, especially after my experience of running my business, financial services practice, and right next door there came a, and it was looking after kids that were kind of put out of the foster system, and there was always commotion. I do understand the concerns of residents. I think the fact that a lot of people that I've at least talked to didn't even know about Naomi and shows that we're operating as per the guidelines that I suggested today.
Thank you. Merci, Conseiller Germain. Councillor Paul Boudreau.
Your clients, the ladies that come from where?
We have always a lot on the waiting list. So for example, the last number that I heard was 40. I've heard up to 70. We're very, very careful. We're not just trying to fill the place. We're careful to make sure that when people come in, they know. So sometimes we work in partnership with one of the institutions. Lady hears about us. She might apply to the court to come and be with us. Sometimes it's somebody that's on the street that has heard about us. Sometimes we got a call this last week and we're put in touch with somebody. And look, this could be my story. I've got 2 daughters and thank God they don't have an addiction problem.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I have a very good friend that I went scuba diving with. Her daughter's 15 and made one wrong choice. And the next thing you know, she's going down a pathway that will lead to her destruction. So that kind of call came in last week. I have a niece that really needs help, but they go into kind of like the queue. And we are, like I said, there's kind of, not everybody really wants our program.
Can you emphasize on, you mentioned a no strict visitor. How do you enforce that? How does it work? Just to be sure that the outlying areas of what you propose
Yeah,
is not a hangout for, you know what I mean? Know what I'm getting at?
I think I understand. Well, part of our strictness is we'll send somebody home. So let's say we have 3 come in and one doesn't make it. We have a conversation with them and we say, we don't think you're a good match for us. If they break a rule, like this is why the subculture of drug addiction is a life of ease. This is not what that is. This is, they get up in the morning at a certain hour. That in itself is a shock to somebody who's been a drug addict. Then they have to go into meetings they have a nourishing meal. They're always, we would have served around 20,000 nourishing meals last year. And then they go into a session that lasts from after lunch, after breakfast until lunch. Then they have some free time with chores. Then they're back in session until supper. So that's basically how the program runs.
Thank you.
So if someone broke the rule to have a visitor, then they're not there. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Conseiller Jean-Claude Bertin?
Yes, a while ago you mentioned the rezoning. We were told that the property had different numbers,
PIDs, yeah.
PIDs.
Yeah.
You're only interested in one PID.
Yeah.
And if we rezone tonight, we're doing all of the PIDs. What happens to the rest of the PIDs if you're only purchasing one PID?
Well, I think you'd have to talk to the vendor and also to Phil Robichaud. Do you know? Put you on the spot.
Yeah. Well, this is news for me tonight. To be honest, the application was made for these 5 PIDs to work together. So,
And that's news to me. I'm sorry for the confusion here.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe that's something that could be sorted out and maybe provide some resolution. Like, I'm here to represent Naomi and Ruth. We're interested in one PID. That's all I can tell you.
That's all you're buying or looking to buy.
We're only buying one PID. We got no other scheme on the side. I have no idea what's happening with the others. I do understand the vendor's here tonight. Maybe you'll hear from her or her son.
Okay. And one more, I think. Conseiller Emile O'Brien.
Merci, Gilman. Just one quick question. You gave a very compelling story. I'll give you that. That's a good presentation. Just finances. How is it financed? Like the people living there for a year. I mean, you lodge them, have to eat, 3 meals a day, and where is the finances coming from for that? Do they pay for that themselves, or do they? I'm not sure. I'm just maybe.
No, it's a fair question. I went to the grocery store the other day and I came out with a bag of groceries and I spent $100. It's expensive.
Yeah.
Right. So what you're saying is true. So we do have a grant from the provincial government that has helped us with our current property. It's an interest-free loan, and we will apply to the province again. They're interested in the kind of thing that we do. However, really, it's private donors. This is a faith-based, as you can kind of see from my introduction, it's a faith-based program. So we received a check from the Catholic Church last week. Catholic Church in Moncton. The week before, we were at the Anglican Church. We will go to Protestant Church. So we're non-denominational. But what you would hear in your church, your Christian church on a Sunday morning, we make a very real part of of our presentation to the ladies for their healing. And I think that is the secret factor that helps us to be so successful. I don't think. I honestly believe. I would be as strong as say, I know. That is the secret factor. That's the secret sauce of what we do. So when they get together, they're hearing about how God can help shape their life. So the AA program, for example, will teach that you need a higher power. We'll define that. And we'll talk to them about Jesus Christ and how kind he is and how loving and how supportive and how he could take their addiction and turn it into good for their lives. And I'm being too long with my answer. I'm saying all that to say that we get a lot of our help from the faith-based community. Catholic churches, Anglican, Protestant churches, Baptist churches, Wesleyan churches, Pentecostal churches. People have a kind heart to help. We want to do that so we can continue to teach in that faith-based atmosphere without being told what we need to teach. And we're not fanatics.
So you're solely relying on
Donations, yeah.
donations.
That's right.
And also for the purchase of the property, is that same? Does that apply to
Same
the purchase
thing,
also?
yeah. So for example, we have a gala event coming up. We've got Natalie McMaster coming to our gala on November the 8th. We're a classy organization, and we expect to raise a lot of operating costs for the coming year at that gala event. But then for the purchase of the property, how much do I say? We have a matching lead gift of $300,000 from an interested foundation. And we have other people that are interested in assisting to that length as well. People are concerned about what's happening in our Canada. And when they see something like this that works, they want to give to it. We would be happy to talk to you about this more. That was a little bit of humor.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, just had one more question. So
Sure.
is there a business plan available for your, like, how it works, how the finances work? That's something that's available publicly, or is that,
We haven't made it available publicly.
you haven't?
And I
Okay.
can take it back to the board and discuss with them.
I'd be interested. It's, it's still a business. You're running still a business. I know it's a very compelling story. What you're doing
It's
is
a compelling story,
no
but
doubt it's a good thing.
you don't run on the compelling.
Yeah, but still running a business, right? So
We're running a business, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Donc,
That good?
thank you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now on est rendu au temps de commentaires
Now,
du public. So,
It's the time for comments for the public.
Notre greffier, I'll be coming to you after, sir, if you like. Le greffier, on
The
a reçu
clerk,
plusieurs
Well, we've received
objections par écrit.
several objections, several written objections,
Puis, Monsieur Greffier, à la fin,
and the clerk will be summarizing what was sent. First of all, thank you for the population Shediac for your participation in this process. We did receive quite a few concerns from citizens. What I will do I will summarize actually 5 items, and in closing, I will speak of a petition that was signed by many people around the Webster House in the Riverside Drive and LeBlanc Street net area. So basically, the major concerns, and actually the council members have already seen those letters in the package that they received in preparation for tonight. Just so that residents know, we're often speaking of the fact that the property loss, property values that could go down given the presence of that type of establishment, the safety of residents, children, families. It might not be an environment that's be perfect for them. General tranquility and quietness in that part of the neighborhood. It's important to preserve the harmony and the integrity of the environment where they are living now. And in terms of infrastructure, some of them are adequate. We're talking about sidewalks and streets. Riverside Street is very limited. There are no sidewalks up to the house. It's an old concern that was mentioned as well. People are also saying that the change in zoning could lead to more group homes in that location afterwards. Tonight, Mr. Robichaud's presentation explained how it would happen, but still, people see the arrival of one group home could lead to the more group homes, that they might buy that property in the future, and it wouldn't be the same type of services offered. And in closing, the residents sent along a petition in that area. According to law, the perimeter where the letter should be sent to residents, it's a 100-meter radius. 42 letters were sent. And over Friday, we received a petition with 65 names on it. In that petition, most of the items that I mentioned were mentioned. So 65 residents signed that petition and sent it to us. So this is a summary of the worries and the concerns of Shediac residents as part of this public hearing. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Clerk. We've had the documents. We've all had a chance to read them. In terms of the public, except for the things said tonight, were there any members of the public who want to speak to the council? There was one person. I take for granted that you understand French. You're coming to me. My name is Samuel Lambeau. I represent the Ambeau family. We're the owners of the Webster House. We've been the owners for about 20 years. As you know, we already presented a project to the town about a year ago. That project did not go forward, but we're still looking for opportunities for the Webster House. It's certain that a historic property like that one requires a certain sense of responsibility in terms of the owner to make sure that the property is respected and used properly. Those two things go together. That property, for it to be respected, it needs to be used. There needs to be a community need. And we looked at this when we looked at this project from Naomi and Ruth. We saw it as a beautiful project in terms of that, how to best use that property. We did our due diligence on our side and before accepting that offer to better understand what is the existing organization. One of the councillors are organized. It's existing here. It's been existing here for a long time. I think that in the village the reputation is very good. We had the opportunity to speak to people who had kids who participated in the program. They always said the same thing. So when we went forward with the project, it's not just to get rent. Other projects could have provided economic benefit. So we're very proud of what Naomi and Ruth are proposing for this property. As a family, we're in a unique position where the former owners and the sellers were also own the closest lots and the closest house to the project. So if somebody is deeply affected by property values, it's us, probably above all anyone else. Once again, that is part of our final decision to support the Naomi Ruth group. As the representative mentioned, as part of this project, certainly there's a community need. We see it for people in the room who have experienced that situation themselves, where there's a family member like that. You'd feel fortunate to have an organization like that in town to welcome them. In terms of the history of the property, Dr. Webster was a specialist in women's health. There was always a nice connection, and that it will be continued to be used to help women in need. So as owners, as residents, as a family that's been in Shediac for a long time in business, we're in favor of the project and we're proud to participate in it. Thank you, Mr. Ambeau. Councillor Cormier, remote.
Vous avez une question pour Monsieur
You
Hambo?
had a question for Mr. Ambo? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Ambo, for your words. About 15 or 20 minutes ago, we realized that there are 5 PID numbers. Ruth seems to be saying that he wants to rezone 1, but as owners, you requested for rezoning of 5 PID numbers. Is it still the same application? That is to say, 5 PID numbers? Or would you be willing to consider that we rezone only 1 rather than all 5? The PID for the Webster House were always very complicated. It's a large lot that was cut up like a puzzle over the years. We inherited this actually. In the transaction, if I'm not mistaken, I'll trust Phil on this one, just to be sure about the details. On our side, there's 2 PIDs in the transaction. I think that those are I think that the website is on one of those PIDs, maybe 2. I think that those are the ones that need to be changed. We had discussions with Phil and his colleagues in terms of rezoning the other lots. For the ones that we maintain, it's not necessary. We'll try to maintain those properties as residential. That means that the application could be modified, perhaps. I'd like to make sure that the details are properly looked at. It's really just those 2 PIDs, if I'm not mistaken. We just want to make sure that we rezone the right ones. That's why we have 3 readings. If this council does decide to go with that, that we look at the application. I agree. I don't know the process, but I'll ask later. Great. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Jonas Cormier is the question. Thank you, Your Worship. You turned around too quickly. It's more for Phil, actually, if I might ask a question of Phil. Now, Phil, is the recommendation of Plan 360, is it still valid with that change? Should it come back to the PRAC table? Should it come back to the Plan 360? It's a technical question. I haven't quite wrapped my head around it. I'd have to think about it a bit more, to be honest, in terms of this 5 versus 1 or 2 PIDs. We had received a request to rezone 5 rather than just the 1. So, are we ready to vote on rezoning during this meeting? As always, it's a public hearing. When it comes time to the special meeting, which will follow, the council, as with any motion, including these ones, they can ask to table it to bring it back to a further meeting if that's the desire of the council, at the will of the council, and wait for clarification, let's say, if so desired. On our side, I understand that principle if we were to add PIDs, but if we should cut them down, and inaudible. It's only on the 3rd reading that things are finalized. So you can adopt the 1st and 2nd reading and make some changes at your 3rd reading as well. If we do that, we will require more than 1 meeting. Madame Ambo, do you want to add something? Just to tell you that when we applied, we're the ones who applied. It had been recommended to put all of them at the time because it was the same owner for everything. At the time, we had no intention of selling all 5. It's simply the one that's a house it's on, the one in front of the house that are involved in the transaction. That was what was recommended to us. Great, thank you. I'll just note that for people and council members,
les conditions dans
uh,
commerce général que c'est zoné
under
maintenant,
general commercial as it's zoned right now, and under its conditions, as I do believe, it was only the addition of group home that was the only real difference. But it took a change under ID, if I've summarized this properly, or integrated development. That was the only real difference that we're talking about here in terms of rezoning. But the project was supposed to involve all 5 properties. So perhaps we'll see. Thank you very much.
Donc,
So,
est-ce qu'il y a des membres du public qui
are
ont
there
d'autres commentaires?
members of the public who have other comments?
Monsieur Arsenault. Bonsoir.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Émile
Good
Arsenault.
evening. My name is Emile Arsenault. I don't have a comment, just some questions. Is this considered a halfway house? Are there prisoners who will come to be treated?
Okay.
And my third question, are they women from the municipality of Shediac that will be treated there or from elsewhere?
Okay.
3 questions.
Monsieur le propriétaire, vous
Maybe the owner?
The gentleman is asking if it was, is the operations considered to be a halfway house? And where these clients come from?
Is there some prisoners coming to be treated there?
And are there prisoners?
And
Or-
the third question is the women being treated there, are they from the municipality of Shediac or are they from
Elsewhere as well. So,
Thank you for the question. So it is not, we don't consider it a halfway house because a halfway house would be, in our view, that specific use to work with people that need to be reintegrated, maybe get out on early parole. And we're not really looking for clients. We're not looking for residents from that source. However, sometimes they do come to us from that source. And if arrangements could be made with their legal representatives, that they would come to us, we don't want to turn them away. We would view ourselves more as servicing people with an addiction problem that have reached bottom. Now, sometimes a person reaches bottom because they got in a car accident and they have an impaired sentence, or they're, told by the courts what they need to do, or maybe they've served 6 months of a 1.5-year sentence. They've reached bottom, they come to us. If somebody comes to us that has been referred to us that way, and they do not make it in the program, we call the police to escort them out. So I want to be honest. It's a really good question that our resident is asking. And I don't want to say that we never work in that way, but we don't look at ourselves as a halfway house.
it's not strictly that
No.
we're limited
It's-
there
No,
in
it's
terms of
like
clientele.
the call we got this week, 2 days ago. Somebody's niece is in trouble. And the problem is there's the government provides a place for detox. But when you're detoxing from addiction, you're detoxing from a lifestyle. And that's why we're a 1-year program. We're not a 1-year program so that people could finish a sentence in our care. That's not what we're there for. We're a 1-year program because the tentacles of addiction create a mindset that needs remedial work. And if you have somebody that that's addicted and they need to be detoxed, they'll go to the hospital for 3 days, maybe a week at the most. And then what? And then they're back with their old friends. They're back with their old people. They can't make change. As far as will we be taking people from here, of course, that's the easy route for somebody who has a problem in the local area. But this problem is rampant across our country. And we take people from all of the Atlantic provinces. So I don't want to be dishonest and say no. And I do understand the concern of the residents who would say, well, you're bringing people with problems into our beloved Shediac. What do we say? Except that we probably weren't even, you probably didn't even know we were there because we're doing it and doing it so successfully and quietly. And I want to remind you that that place where you went and got gas last week, and you went into the confectionery store and bought a chocolate bar, you may have been served by one of our graduates, because we teach them how to be employment ready. That's part of the disciplined life that needs to be maintained by them. So this is our passion. Thank you for the question. I'm trying to answer honestly and not, blow smoke.
Thank you. Autre question de la part du public?
Any other questions from the public?
Madame Maillard-Sonneau. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Good
Moi, je me
evening.
demande,
I wonder,
c'est-tu comparable à
is this comparable
au group home à Norton,
to the group home in Norton,
Atlantic?
Portage Atlantic?
Compare.
How do they compare?
Réponse. Je sais pas si le monsieur peut.
I don't know if you could come back, and I don't know if you know the answer to that question. Do you know
Does it
that
compare?
facility?
How does it compare?
Thank you for the question. And it is different than the Partners for Youth, Cassidy Lake in Britain. It's been there for about 30 years. My classmate, Dr. Russ King, has been chair of that for about 25 years. It's a government program. Oh, it's a private program, but supported by the government in a big way. It's not faith-based. So that's why the government will support it. Because we are faith-based. We don't get that support. It's similar in what they're trying to do, but it's a different system.
Okay. Madame Maillard-Sonneau, c'est juste.
Cassidy Lake is in the country. I've been there.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer, Doctor.
Yeah.
Donc, est-ce que les membres du conseil avec d'autres questions quelconques?
Are there any other questions that the council members had?
Oh, another member of the public, sorry. Good evening, ma'am.
Good
Bonjour.
evening. My name is Ina. Sorry, super nervous. I have a question for the future owner, please.
Well, you need to face here so we
I'm sorry.
can record.
There's like really question that bothers me that I would like to know. What are the measure of the new owner going to be to protect the neighbors and the citizen? Because like the gentleman already mentioned, if they're breaking the rules, that's mean the rules were breaking in the past and, could be broken in the future as well. So what are the measures to be a good neighbor to the family neighborhood? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if either of you would answer that, but
Was I clear? Like, do I need to explain myself? Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'd like, if I could, to have a member of our board answer that question.
Sure.
Dr. JF, would you come and perhaps you could adequately answer the question? I'm sorry, I didn't say your title. I think you.
No, that's okay. That's a
forensic.
That's okay. Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, council members, for having me. My name is Dr. JF. I work in forensic psychiatry, and I was the head of research director, and I'm one of the board members for Naomi and Ruth.
Okay.
So the question earlier asked whether we have any correction inmates coming in the facility. The correction does offer a number of services. by itself. So they have different referral processes, they're different community organizations. So we serve in Shediac, the Shediac local members to do. And they're the mothers, the sisters, the granddaughters of the community in Shediac. In terms of the safety concerns, in terms of risk, in terms of priority, risk of recidivism or dissonance or anything, we have a very clear eligibility criteria. We look at the suitability of the resident. We do a very in-depth interview. We do a very serious intake, and we have a number of measures. If the resident is not suitable, we then make a referral to other organizations or services to do. So we never take a false positive, if as best as possible clinically to do, and we work with the client as best as possible to do. And we have several surveillance measures, support measures, and security measures where we have a regular review of various data points to do. So this is a residential service, and I'm not sure how the name group home came in, but it's a residential family setting kind of environment that we run and then we oversee. And the reason it's important to talk about residential and families, each one keeps an eye on the other. And the other security measure, the question is, the graduates are the previous successful residents. So it's a cyclic idea until the graduate is ready to move on to the community, they then become the leader. So it's a very cyclic residential. So they keep safeguard of the integrity of the program in how it is run. I hope I've answered the question. If I haven't, I'll come back.
Thank you. Donc, question de la part des other members of the body. Bonsoir.
Okay, council member or other public. I've got a question for the council. It's not a question and answer session. It's to hear your objections. Well, I think it's a good project. I think what they're doing is really good. It looks good. It looks like it's well done. It's well organized, and we do need it. But is Shediac, could Shediac have a different place where this service could be offered so that our Riverside Promenade, which I have always loved, there's a best, nicest place in Shediac. It's going to turn into, whoops, a place where the police shows up. I don't know. We don't know where this is going to lead. The other thing that's a bit surprising is it's 5 property PID numbers. So is they're going to want to expand it to other PIDs after that? I think there's a lot of questions that we have to answer before we can do this. And, it's a really nice street. It has a lot of potential for the residents who pay millions of dollars for those houses. We're paying very high prices to stay in our apartment block. So I wonder if you could do a nice walkway. I think that would be my comment that I wanted to add. Thank you.
No commentaire, monsieur?
Oui, Pierre Gaudreau.
Yes, Pierre Gaudreau. Talking about the other lots, maybe we're going to reconsider what's going to be done with those lots, but yes, that is to be determined. But if the lots are separated, subdivided, they shouldn't necessarily become commercial. Once the Webster is no longer belongs to that group, it should become residential like the rest of it. Of that section, we shouldn't say, okay, well, that's if it was commercial, it should stay commercial. The reason it was commercial is because, well, it could have been a nice hotel or something. There are things that it could have been done with it.
Mais si on commence à mettre quelque chose là, on ne peut pas mettre un restaurant à côté.
But you're not going to, put a restaurant next to it or something like that. And that's not likely to happen. But I think.
Avec la bonne désignation.
But it should be properly designated, properly zoned. It shouldn't necessarily go to what it is now if you're breaking it up. Like that doesn't require it to become what it is currently.
No commentaire, monsieur? No
Another
comment?
comment.
Bonsoir, moi c'est Frédéric Blanchette, je suis résident
Frédéric
sur la rue
Blanchette.
Blanc.
I live on the Blanc Street.
Premièrement, quand j'ai vu
When I saw
qui a circulé dans
the
la presse,
letter
ça m'a
that
un peu,
went out in the mail, I was a little bit confused. Wasn't really sure what it was going to be. Was it a group home? That's a pretty broad term. And then when I started to dig into it a bit more to see what is Naomi and Ruth, what I've heard this evening, I'm very pleased. I think it's a good project, and I think it has its place in our society, and I think it also has its place in Shediac. But I have a big but that I want to underline in red. What happens after naming and Ruth? What if they decide to shut up shop and leave town with that lot designated as a group home? Does it go back to what it was before, or does it stay a group home? Are there other types of group homes that could come in that might be higher risk, perhaps, that could take over? That is my question, and it might be a question for you and also for Phil Robichaud. Yes, our urban planner. That is correct. Seeing no one else, thank you all for your questions and comments. Do the council members have any other questions?
So Phil, concernant la question.
So as to its question,
Si que Naomi Road décide de vendre l'année prochaine, et quelqu'un veut faire un groupe home, ça passe pas ici, là.
They decided to do a group home next year. No, that's right. That zoning does not guarantee that house would necessarily be turned over to another group home. No, it would have to be approved again.
Conseiller Roland, combien à distance?
Mr. Roland Cormier.
Merci. C'est la même chose que j'appelle d'essayer de trouver une solution.
I wanted to say the same thing. There's nothing in the Urban Planning Act that's thinking outside the box here. If we do this, could allow for a temporary structure to deal with the concerns. No, this zoning is related to the permitted usage, so you can't attach it to an organization, a specific organization. The recommendation is based on the fact that the property was unique and it was deemed appropriate to this usage.
Merci pour
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Je pense qu'on cherche une réponse, puis il n'y a personne qui peut nous le
We're
dire.
looking for an answer, and no one seems to be giving it to us. But
le conseil, on peut-tu mettre comme une condition qu'on dit, ouais, le next owner qui a la property, faut que ça s'est passé à travers nous autres pour faire un meeting. C'est pas quoi qu'on peut faire.
we have to look at the property here and say what we're doing with it. The council has the right to put conditions on it. We can put whatever conditions but it has to be something that is permitted by law. That is correct. That's not one.
Donc, ça vient à terminer notre audience publique.
And so this leads to the end of our public hearing. So now we need a motion to close the public hearing. Janice Cormier, supported by Emile O'Brien. All in favor? All opposed? Carried. Thank you. So then we jump straight into our special meeting.
Donc, vous avez pu rafraîchir vos écrans. Vous avez l'ordre du jour devant vous.
You have the agenda in front of you.
Bonsoir encore.
So welcome once again.
Et on peut constater qu'on a le quorum.
We have the quorum.
Un membre absent, mais un membre.
The clerk, we have an absent member line. Any conflicts of interest to be declared? For the items on the agenda.
Conflit d'intérêt, conseiller Boudreau?
Non, juste une question.
Conflict of interest, Mr. Paul Boudreau. There's conflict of interest. This is the time to declare that. Okay, fine.
Adoption de l'ordre du jour. Donc, vous
Okay.
avez devant vous l'ordre du jour.
The agenda, you have that before you.
J'aurais besoin d'une motion.
I would need a motion to
Posée par le
adopt
conseiller
the agenda.
appuyé de
Bertin,
Boudreau.
supported by or seconded by Paul Boudreau. Question, yes, a question. Why is it a special meeting? Why isn't it an ordinary meeting? A regular meeting? Because the agenda doesn't allow us it's not on our normal or regular calendar. That's why. So you certain, and we do need certain decisions. So certain readings. So this is a special meeting for that reason only.
Oui, mais la dernière réunion, conseiller Boudreau, vous l'avez annulée avec tous les membres du conseil aussi.
The last meeting was cancelled in order to hold an in-camera meeting, so that this had to be added as a special meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Donc, on avait question pour l'ordre du jour. On a besoin de voter. C'était proposé, appuyé.
We didn't need to. Everybody. Okay, we do need to carry the agenda. So anybody opposed? Carried.
Conseiller Bertin et conseiller Boudreau.
Councillor Bertin, Councillor Boudreau.
Donc, numéro 5, motion et résolution.
Number 5, motions and resolutions. We have our resolutions or motions in front of us, which is in number 5.
Ouais, 5 points. OK, je savais là, puis je voyais une autre chose. Non, en tout cas, là.
Okay.
Donc, 5.1 pour le
5.1. This is 7-14-44-56Z. You see that the recommendation for rezoning. We have held the public meeting, and now Mr. Robichaud, I think you need to present a little something. I need to clarify something about question 5. Item 5. Something new for us. We have a special application for the 5. So this is new information, which so the council has 2 options. It can do the rezoning as such for the group home, which is possible, which could then be rezoned into something else. Or second option could be to start the process again with one PID, with that PID, with the building on it, the PID with the building on it. That's right.
Just come square one.
Square one, retourner au prac, retourner.
So back to square one.
Okay.
Right.
Square one.
Okay, so that would be another public hearing, right? That's what square one means.
Thank you for clarifying.
Oui, Monsieur DG.
Mr. CAO, if I'm understanding you correctly, if the owner wants to modify or the proponent makes a modification to their application, that wouldn't be an option. We've already made a recommendation for a specific bylaw. We've already proposed the 2 PIDs in the transaction be part of the rezoning, and the 3 PID would stay with us. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Ambo. If we can't do that by law, if we can't make that change by law without restarting the process, it took 222 days last time. And I understand that. And that's not my intention. I don't want to delay things just to delay things. For the application right now is for all 5. That's before us, that's before the council. Simply, as Mr. Robichaud was saying, we can decide to go ahead with the 5 or basically not proceed with the 5 and restart with 1 or 2 with the properties that are actually part of the transaction. So, for the moment, it's first reading To have debate, we need to have something on the table. So I would need a motion to have so that we can have the debate on the question. This is the under the law. This is how it works. 5.1, first reading for this application for rezoning or rezoning application. Councillor Joël Després, would you move it? I will read it. There'll surely be commentaries and discussions after. 5.1.1, first reading, Z-44-44-44Z- that the introduction of a bylaw entitled Bylaw Number Z-14-44-56Z, a bylaw amending the Town of Shediac zoning bylaw, and repealing bylaw Z-14-44-49Z be approved and read a first time by its title. Moved by Councillor Joël Després, seconded by Councillor Germaine Galland. Any questions? So, Phil, so now, let's say we accept that we rezone all of these 5 properties rather than restarting. That means all of those owners could have a group home. The 5 properties would work together for one use. There could be another application to adjust it if it's just to be limited to 2 or 3 properties. There's 5 different PIDs. Out of those 5 PIDs, you could have a building on each that could operate the same business. The bylaw was for one group home at Webster House. Sorry. The ID zone, integrated development zone, it creates specific zoning for the property that includes the project for which there's an application. The PID itself, the project, the application for a specific project on the 5 PIDs. There's nothing that can be done on that land except that was contained in the application because it is an ID zone. You don't have a list of permitted usages in an ID zone. It's specific zoning for a project. Thank you. Councillor Janice Cormier, thank you, Your Worship. So let's say we do the bylaw night and we deal with them as 5 PIDs, and can the owners do the 2 PIDs and just keep the 3 others with the same zoning? The zoning would be taken. It depends on. You can only do one thing. After they need to submit another application. In my I think there's too many inconsistencies here. There's too many inconsistencies. 1 PID, 2 IPIDs, 5 PIDs. Has PRAC made the proper recommendations? They recommended 5 PIDs. Does it change things when it comes to Plan 360 to have 2 PIDs? And then there's another question about 3 PIDs. Too many inconsistencies, really. Can we table the reading to look at this inconsistency? If we table it and we start it, if we're starting up at 0, there's too many inconsistencies to make a decision. That's an informed decision. As I think, I would like to propose that we table this bylaw to clarify these inconsistencies. But if we table, are we starting from scratch? If we table, it doesn't restart the process from 0. It tables it. It puts a pause onto it. So to table, basically, it would be so that we might we'll often to get additional information to be able to have a better picture of things. I'm going to. So your motion to table hadn't been seconded either, actually. Councillor Patricia Brooke-Chevalier will probably ask the same question 5 different ways.
Peut-être la tienne, c'est la bonne.
Maybe your way is the right way. There'd be two PIDs. If we go forward, they'd be, they'll all be rezoned, but there'd be two PIDs that are owned by the one owner and three the other. But the three that are owned to the other one could never do a group home project. That's it. That's it. Well, they could rezone for single family dwelling or R2, but they could never do not beyond what is part of the application tonight. That what is applied for will be what could be approved. You couldn't install a second and third. They come before us if they already have that zoning. I find it strange that it's zoned away, but they could never do a project like that either. The application had the 5 properties as one 5 PIDs as one property. Even if they're just buying 2 PIDs, yes.
Okay, merci.
Okay, thank you.
Parfait.
That's great.
Conseiller Roland Cormier.
Councillor Ronald Cormier, remote.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a citizen, Mr. Gautreau, who asked an interesting question. I'll ask it in his name. I don't know him though. The question that was, right now we're zoned commercial for all 5 PIDs. He seemed to be saying that if the council were to decide to go forward, the 3 PIDs that are not sold had been zoned commercial. Could the council, if we do go forward, perhaps the council could consider excluding them and making them R1 again? And the answer as part of this process is no. Right now, those 5 properties, those 5 PIDs are zoned general commercial with many restrictions. It's not an ordinary general commercial. And this is to rezone those 5. If the all 5 are the property of one owner or divided between owners, that's secondary. It's not relevant to this question. It's to zone one thing, and according to what Plan 360 is telling us, if I'm reading it correctly, but tell me if I'm wrong. It's for one project. It's not for several projects. It's one project that would be, as discussed, that would be allowed among those 5, whoever is the owner. It might not be relevant for what we're talking about tonight, but certainly relevant for the citizens who live around. It's not relevant. I agree with you, Your Worship. It's not relevant to the transaction. It's not a mean comment. But it does, I'm just saying it's relevant to the residents in terms of that development. Thank you, Councillor Cormier. Councillor Emile Bryan. Thank you, Your Worship. I hope that we've made some sense of this. So this is for integrated development, that zoning. The first time I hear about it during these meetings. I've not seen it on the agenda before. So I think I will try to table the motion. I just want more information on this type of zoning. Is there some people I'd like to speak with, and the residents who've written letters, I'd like to speak with them as well. I'd like to inform myself to make sure I'm making the right decision. Well, I'm going to propose, move that we table it, and to pause this process. If I could find a seconder, that'd be fine. But if not, I have a motion to table. Would somebody like to second the motion? I don't see anybody.
Merci.
Thank you.
Councillor McEnroy.
Councillor McEnroy.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't support the staff recommendation because it has come to light during the process, during the public portion of the process, that neither the vendor nor the purchaser perspective intended the outcome to be what's before us tonight. And given that this new information has come to light, I think the only way to proceed to make sure that everything is done properly and correctly from the beginning is to begin again. But having said that, I understand that there is due process, which does take time. But I would think that if council chooses to go in the direction that I would support, I think that we could at least request that the new process be expedited
as much as possible.
Possible, so that the delays are not extended beyond what is absolutely necessary. I think that because we know now the information that we know, I don't think that it would be logical for us to proceed to do something that is not wrong in a sense strictly, but in my mind, it's not clear cut and concise and exact to the extent that the purchaser and vendor would like it. So that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you. Conseil Joël Després.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Moi aussi, je pense pareil comme
I think just like Harry, it wasn't really clear tonight. I do support this project. I support this project. We need help. But with all the information that we saw tonight, if they could be restarted and presented properly, I hope it would happen quickly. I don't want to see it take 220 days for that to happen, especially given that all of this information has already been given to Plan 360. That's for the reason that I would not be supporting this tonight. Councillor Paul Boudreau. That being said, how long does it take to start from scratch? 1 month, 6 months? There's a fair amount of work that was done. 2 weeks, a month, but typically 3 to 4 months. If the council needs to make a resolution to launch the process, then it has to line up with the timelines for the PRAC and notices to neighbors. There's something that can happen so it goes faster. Many of the delays, many of the timelines are set out by law. There's a minimum. I know that simple is not in our vocabulary tonight. The application is specific from the owner and the seller. Oh, it's only one part of the 5. It couldn't just be simplified. The application was for all 5 PIDs. That's what we went forward with. And the application was very clear. Mr. Abou, respectfully, the council members understand the situation as I can see it. We are restricted in terms of the planning commission. It's based on the planning law act. At this point, what we're seeing with is before the council tonight, it's to rezone all of those 5 properties. That's what we see before us. Basically, we can either go forward or we can go backwards. And that's basically it. There might be a bit of division here. I'm going to ask for a vote by where people raise their hands. Councillor Roland is no longer on the screen. At any rate, we had first reading that was moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hands. 3. All those against. 7. Thank you. It's defeated. The motion is defeated. With the first reading that is not adopted, we don't proceed to second reading. Next item, 5.2. Bylaw. Shediac, it's Z144456Z. Thank you, Your Worship. First reading, 2025 budget, that the bylaw entitled Bylaw Number B-2510, a bylaw in relation to the budget of Centre Shediac Downtown Inc. be authorized, and that this bylaw be given a first reading by its title. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Patricia Brooke-Chevalier, seconded by Councillor Jean-Claude Bertin. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor shall say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Mr. Clerk. Pardon me. Bylaw B-2510, a bylaw related to the budget of Centre Downtown Inc. Be resolved that we accept the first reading of the bylaw by its title. Moved by Councillor Patricia Chevalier, seconded by Councillor Jean-Claude Bertin. All those in favor shall say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Second reading. Councillor Patricia Brooke-Chevalier. Second reading, 2025 budget. Be it resolved that the second reading of bylaw number B-25-10 by title in its entirety all those in favor shall say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Mr. Clerk. Bylaw number B-2510, budget related to, whereas the Municipal Council of the Town of Shediac has adopted an business improvement zone based on the, whereas that law authorizes that the council impose a contribution on non-residential goods in the zone, business improvement zone. Consequently, the council duly paragraph 5 and the law on for 20 cents and imposed on all non-residential goods situation in the business improvement zone described in B-11 adopted in 1st of January 2025 and closing out 31 December 2025. This bylaw shall come into effect the day of its definitive adoption. Be it resolved that we accept the second reading of bylaw B-25-10 by its title in its entirety. Moved by Councillor Patricia Brooke-Chevalier, seconded by Councillor Jean-Claude Bertin. All those in favor shall say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. So next point, changing the date for the ordinary meeting of thank you. Whereas the provincial elections will be held on October 21, 2024 in New Brunswick, whereas the Municipal Council of the Town of Shediac was to hold its ordinary meeting that same night as the provincial elections. Be it resolved that the regular meeting for October 21, 2024 at 6 o'clock be moved to 22nd of October, 2024. I so move. Moved by Councillor Jean-Claude Bertin, seconded by Councillor Emile O'Brien. Any questions? Go to 5 instead of 5.3. That's a mistake. Instead of adding it in the right spot, it's under 5. The text is correct. Rest assured. It's quite technical. All those in favor shall say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Jean-Claude and Germain. Thank you. So now a motion for adjournment, please. Councillor Germain proposes that we adjourn. Thank you. So that's the public part that's done. Now we're going in camera. Before we go in camera, we're going to have a little break. Thank you. Okay.
Il y a un gros trou en avant, là. Bon, ben, Roland n'est pas là. Sylvain? Sylvain? Le bon Dieu te parle? Non, non. Nos traducteurs sont-ils là ou pas là?
Ils sont pas là.
OK.
Ils sont là encore. On les veut dessus, on les veut pas.
Non, c'est.
Les clos, parfait. Donne-moi une seconde, je vois.
OK.
Ouais, c'est vrai, hein, ça pose tout le temps.
Ouais, je vais le.
On va les booter out. Techniquement, ils peuvent, comme le cabinet a de la traduction simultanée en tout temps. But,
Non, on l'a maintenant, on a juste.
mais le cabinet, à least le temps Victor, ça déroulait uniquement en anglais. So, inside school.
You won't have the translation.
We'll be doing it in English. There you go.
We're switching to your language.
So, thank you for your time so far. Hopefully, these are a few subjects that are going to be not really quick, but hopefully we'll get through it decently. Anyway.
It's arrêté, là. Oui.
Yeah.
It's fixed.